जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी
जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी
जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी
जय गोपी जन वल्लभ
गिरिवरदारी
जय यशोदानंदन व्रज जन रंजना
यशोदानंदन ब्रज जन रंजन
यमुना तीरा वनचारी
यमुना तीरा वनचारी
जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी
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 जय गोपी जन वल्लभ गिरिवरदारी
जय गोपी जन वल्लभ गिरिवरदारी
यशोदानंदन व्रज जन रंजना
यशोदानंदन ब्रज जन रंजन
यमुना तीरा वनचारी
यमुना तीरा वनचारी
जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी
जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी
हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे
हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे
हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे
हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे
हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम राम हरे हरे
हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे
जय राधा कुंज बिहारी राधा कुंज बिहारी राधे
जय राधा कुंज बिहारी
Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada.
Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada.
Jai Harinam Sankirtana ki,
Jai.
Srila Prabhupada ki,
Jai.
Ananta Koti Vaishya Vrinda ki.
Jai.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda.
Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda.
Jaya Advaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda.
Jaya Advaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda.
Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda.
Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda.
Jaya Advaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda.
Jaya Advaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda.
Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda.
Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda.
Jaya Advaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda.
Jaya Advaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda.
Hare Krishna, devotees. So, welcome to this continued discussion of Chaitanya Caritamrita. It's the most beautiful and nectarian Shastra scripture presented to us by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada presented this Chaitanya Caritamrita was very early in his book translation endeavors, even before completing Srimad Bhagavatam, understanding its great content and ability to inspire the process of devotional service within all of us. So we're very fortunate that he has presented Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami's narration of the pastimes of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu very sweetly. So we'll discuss today a little bit, continuing chapter 9 about Sanatana Goswami's instructions. The chapter title of Madhya Lila, chapter 20, is The Lord Instructs Sanatana Goswami. So last time we talked about Sanatana Goswami's arrival at Varanasi, how he had, very intelligently escaped the jailer and then made his way through, met his brother-in-law along the way, and then reached the home of Chandrasekhar. And there he had a very sweet exchange with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, where Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, with his own hand, was cleansing the body of Sanatana Goswami. Sanatana Goswami was very, disturbed by that affection, feeling himself contaminated. But Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was so dear and so loving to Sanatana Goswami that he rendered this very sweet exchange. They embraced, they sat together, and then finally Sanatana Goswami is taken for getting cleaned up, shaving the beard and the hair, putting on a used dhoti, and of course finally exchanging the very expensive quilt that he had acquired from his brother-in-law Shrikant, understanding that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu disapproved of that acquisition or possession, because Sanatana Goswami was living in a very austere way. And in the beginning of the conversation between him and Sanatana Goswami that we are reading now today and will continue for several weeks, Sanatana Goswami presented himself in a very humble mood of inquiry. And Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami is explaining that the ability to even inquire comes from Krishna. So just as Ramananda Rai was speaking and answering Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's inquiries, and Ramananda Rai was saying that I'm only speaking what you are telling me, so as if you're speaking to yourself. So not only speaking, but also inquiring. It is a great mercy of the Supreme Lord to know what to inquire about, and to know how to ask the right questions that will yield a great result. So Sanatana Goswami presented himself in a very humble mood, saying he doesn't know what to ask. Of course he did, but he said, I am here now. You please tell me my duty. And so in a very surrendered mood, he presented himself to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, saying, I don't have any desires of my own of what to do. You just tell me what you would like me to do. And of course, Sanatana Goswami was presented with 4 main activities that he was going to perform, including preaching the cult of Krishna consciousness, establishing the various places of pilgrimage within Vrindavan, writing books about the science of devotional service, and establishing temples, places of worship. So these 4 services were given to Sanatana Goswami. And so before departing, Sanatana Goswami is now asking some questions. And there will be 4 entire chapters dedicated to this question and answer, so we can understand the importance of this dialogue. So in verse 97, we discussed last week that there are really 4 topics that Sanatana Goswami is going to hear about from Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And the first is, who is Krishna? And that is primarily today's topic, and it'll continue to next week as well. The second topic Chaitanya Mahaprabhu will speak about, he'll speak about the very glorious Madhurya Rasa, the highest rasa in Goloka Vrindavan. And then the third topic he'll speak about is Krishna's opulences. And finally, the fourth topic he'll discuss is the mellows of bhakti. So this will take us through the several next many chapters. So today we'll discuss about 180 or so verses, or at least cover. We won't discuss that many verses. Don't worry, we won't be here till midnight. But we'll discuss a few of the topics presented in this section. So I wanted to read the verse today from text number 162 is what we'll read today. Krishna menam avahitvam atmanam akilatmanam jagaditaya sopi atra devi bahiti mayaya. Translation: You should know Krishna to be the original soul of all Atmas, living entities. For the benefit of the whole universe, he has out of his causeless mercy appeared as an ordinary human being. He has done this by the strength of his own internal potency. Purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki
Jai.
This quotation is from Srimad Bhagavatam 10:14-55. Parikshit Maharaj asked Shukadev Goswami why Krishna was so beloved by the residents of Vrindavan, who loved him even more than their own offspring or life itself. At that time, Shukadev Goswami replied that everyone's Atma or soul is very, very dear, especially to all living entities who have accepted material bodies. But that Atma, the spirit soul, is part and parcel of Krishna. For this reason, Krishna is very dear to every living entity. Everybody's body is very dear to oneself, and one wants to protect the body by all means. Within the body, the soul is living. Because within the body, the soul is living. Due to the intimate relationship between the soul and the body is important and dear to everyone. Similarly, the soul, being part and parcel of Krishna, the Supreme Lord, is very, very dear to all living entities. Unfortunately, the soul forgets his constitutional position and thinks he is the only body, Deha Atma Buddhi. Thus, the soul is subjected to the rules and regulations of material nature. When a living entity, by his intelligence, reawakens his attraction for Krishna, he can understand that he is not the body, but part and parcel of Krishna. Thus, filled with knowledge, he no longer labors under attachment to the body and everything related to the body. Janasya moho ayam aham mamiti. Material existence, wherein one thinks I'm the body and this belongs to me is illusory. One must redirect his attraction to Krishna. Srimad Bhagavatam 1:227 says, Vasudeva Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Prayojitaha Janayati Ashu Vairagyam Janam Jnanam Chayad Ahutikam. By rendering devotional service under the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, one immediately acquires causeless knowledge and detachment from the world. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurum Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Guru Vaishnavamsam Shri Rupam Sagajatam Sagana Raghunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Paritana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sagana Lalita Shri Vishaka Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dhinabandhu Jagapate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanustate Devi Pranamami Hari Pre Vanchakalpatrubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyeva Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavani Paschatya Deshatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadara Shri Vasri Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, everyone. So, this verse Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is quoting, and Prabhupada presents a very beautiful purport here. And it explains to us how dear Krishna is to us. So, and the analogy is given between the attachment between the soul and the body. That the jiva, because they are attached to the body, they look after the body with such great care and attention, because they identify it as being related, even though it is illusion that the soul and the body are related, but by the perspective having been conditioned by material nature, that the living entity in the material world is so attached to its body. It is caring for it, protecting it, very conscious of all things that occur to it, and is always in awareness of that body. So, Prabhupada is explaining, and this verse is explaining, that Krishna has that same level of care and concern for all of us. Why? Because we are his part and parcel. So just like a mother has natural and unending care for their child, because they are related, at least materially, right? This offspring has come from me. And thus, the mother has extraordinary love for that child. Even if child doesn't reciprocate back love, that mother's and father's love doesn't end. So because we are offspring of Krishna, part and parcel of him, he also has great attachment for all of us. But due to our conditioning, we have forgotten our attachment for him. So as a child may run away from home and trying to forget parents, parents never forget child. Because it's part of them. So this verse speaks about how dear the living entity, all atmas, all living entities are to the Supreme Lord. Because we are part and parcel of him, we are part of his family. And it positions us in a great situation of care and protection and ultimately unending love of the Supreme Lord. So in our awakening of bhakti, we are simply trying to reciprocate that love. The love from Krishna is already coming. And we are in the process of awakening our natural attraction. Because our attachment to this body and to the bodies around us are all illusion. It's all temporary. But it's a nice, powerful analogy that because we view the soul and body as related, there's great care for that. Similarly, because we are part and parcel, related to Krishna, we should never forget Krishna loves us to never-ending amounts, just as a mother and father love their children with no end. So very nice purport here. And Prabhupada quotes at the end of this verse that how to detach from this bodily conception, it is by rendering devotional service. By rendering devotional service to Krishna, knowledge comes and detachment. Those are the two byproducts of bhakti. So as we remain attached to our bodily conception of life, continue practicing devotional service, and we will soon detach and reattach to the Supreme Lord. Now this knowledge also is important, because in this section of Chaitanya Caritamrita, we're going to see a lot of very technical explanations and very detailed and technical aspects of Krishna, his expansions, different energies, how they all combine to manifest creation, and all these details. And at some point it can become very intimidating, overwhelming. How to keep all this straight? Well, remember, how knowledge will come? Through bhakti. So keep chanting, keep reading, and this knowledge will slowly penetrate. Because it is only by devotional service that we can understand it. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu actually explains this in verse 164. He says, only by devotional activity can one understand the transcendental form of the Lord, which is perfect in all respects. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is foreshadowing for us. Hey, this part's going to be difficult, technical. Only by bhakti can one try to really understand the transcendental form of the Lord and all his expansions. So yes, we'll try to study it today a little bit in summary form. But remember, we'll study it more dynamically through our process of chanting and devotional service. Okay? Now, in verse 166, we see an opening statement. Now remember, the topic we're discussing here today, that the first of the four topics is who is Krishna. So in 166, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu establishes a very important concept. He says the original form of the Lord, Swayam Rupa, is exhibited in two forms, Swayam Rupa and Swayam Prakash. In his original form as Swayam Rupa, Krishna is observed as a cowherd boy in Vrindavan. So we understand that the original form of the Lord is Krishna as a cowherd boy in Vrindavan. So now we're going to talk about many different avatars and different manifestations, and Lord Vishnu's, many different types, varieties of Lord Vishnu and Narayan, and all of these things, Lord Brahma, Lord Shiva. And there comes to the point where we have to understand, that, okay, who is the source of everything? So here, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is establishing, before he gets into this detail, for our benefit, that Krishna, as a cowherd boy in Vrindavan, is the source. He is the Swayam Rupa, which means source of everything. Okay? Now, when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu later in verse 178, he describes a characteristic. He says that when one compares the beauty, opulence, sweetness, and intellectual pastimes of Vasudeva, the warrior, to Krishna, the cowherd boy, the son of Nanda Maharaj, one sees that Krishna's attributes are more pleasant. So here Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is describing even amongst Krishna's pastimes, that his pastimes in Vrindavan are more pleasant, the attributes are more pleasant than even the pastimes as a warrior, as he went to Mathura and then Dwarka and performing many battles and in a mood of opulence. That Vasudev Krishna is compared. So we see that this Swayamrupa, this is the original fountainhead of all incarnations that we'll talk about. And so the conclusion then Chaitanya Mahaprabhu makes in the 167th verse. So establishing this, he makes a very important point. And this point is largely confused, particularly in India. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says, in his original form, Krishna manifests himself. No, sorry. I'm looking for another verse. Give me 1 second. Okay, sorry. So this is verse 173. So in verse 173, it says, in different Vedic scriptures, there are prescribed rules and regulative principles for worshiping the different types of forms. When one is purified by these rules and regulations, he worships you, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Although manifested in many forms, you are one. So here we see that there are many, many different types of avatars and forms of Krishna. But when one is purified by all those different types of worship, then they come to the worship of Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And this statement comes from Srimad Bhagavatam. This is a prayer composed by Akrura after having had the very mystical experience of seeing Krishna and Balaram in the Yamuna. So he is establishing that ultimately our worship will come to Krishna, the cowherd boy of Vrindavan. So this is, when we start to explain and hear about the many, many different avatars, and sometimes we wonder, who should we worship? Is there a difference? In one way they're the same, but in another way, from an absolute perspective, there is some gradations. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is establishing the sweetest of pastimes, and also quoting from different shastra, including Srimad Bhagavatam, that the ultimate is to come to the worship of Krishna. So this is established. Now we'll begin again a very technical aspect of discussion here, and this discussion is important. We sometimes wonder, why do I need to know all these different details, and what's the relevance of it? So the relevance of it is that this detail is not necessarily just for us to memorize and be able to regurgitate, but it's to convince us that the all of creation and everything that we are in existence of, it is all being done and managed very precisely and very scientifically under the direction of Krishna. So, the idea of trying to speculate how this world came into being, how many universes there are, where am I in this universe, what is this, all of this is being done under the supreme will of Krishna. So now sometimes when we say that, we have some doubts. Our faith isn't there. So the details now are given in extraordinary detail to inspire us. Wow, this is exactly how it happens. And so the conclusion of understanding this is not that I have to memorize the different types of expansions and the Guna avatars versus the Lila avatars versus the Shakti Avesha avatar. No. To understand, Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and we should surrender it to Him. And no need for our own material-minded endeavor try to scientifically explore all of this. It is given here. And this detail will awe you with how perfectly it's presented. So we'll begin, and then, again, this will be quite technical. Don't worry so much about trying to memorize and understand all the different things, but just appreciate the depth in which our Shastra explains everything in detail of how things came into creation. There is no need to speculate. And so if our Shastra can explain these sorts of things, we can understand. It is a very potent literature for us to understand Sambandha Abhideya Prayojana. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said last week that the purpose of Shastra is to understand Sambandha, our relationship with Krishna. Abhideya, how to act in that relationship. And then Prayojana, the goal, Krishna Prema, the topmost thing. So we'll see an aspect of Shastra today that will inspire us to understand, wow, how amazing is Krishna and how amazing are the details. Okay? So we see that, and again, I'm not going to read so many verses in this section, but just going to summarize now. So the first expansion from Krishna is Lord Balaram. So immediately Krishna expands himself as Lord Balaram. And Srila Prabhupada guides us that Balaram is also considered the Supreme Personality of Godhead. They are one and the same, two different colors, but they are of equal potency. So, and from Lord Balaram, all the subsequent creation occurs. All the different avatars and all of the creation. So Krishna himself expands him into Balaram, and from there he continues enjoying in Goloka Vrindavan. Okay? So from Lord Balaram, we get to the first quadruple expansion. We get to the first quadruple expansion. That is Vasudeva, Sankarshana, Pradyumna, and Anuruddha. Okay? Now these quadruple expansion, the first quadruple expansion, emphasizing first because we'll see there's a second set, they reside in the spiritual world in Mathura and Dwarka. So Goloka Vrindavan as a whole is broken up into three parts: Dwarka, Mathura, and Gokul, or Vraj, Vrindavan. So Krishna resides in Vrindavan, within Goloka Vrindavan, and these first quadruple expansions, Prabhupada and Chaitanya were guiding us, that they reside within the Mathura and Dwarka regions of Goloka. Now, from here, there are different manifestations. There is then Lord Narayan comes, and then a second quadruple expansion. So a second set of Vasudeva, Shankarshana, Pradyumna, Anuruddha. And from here, there are in total 24 different expansions. So from the second quadruple, we have some additional expansions. And now this becomes relevant to us for two reasons. There are 4 quadruple expansions, and each of them have 3 expansions. So that makes 3 times 4 is 12. And how many months in the year we have? 12. So each of the predominating deities of each month come from this expansion of the second quadruple expansion. And when we mark our body with tilak, how many places on our body we mark with tilak? 12.
12.
And each place that we mark our tilak, we are remembering one of these 12 expansions. So, now who are they? So from Vasudeva, the first of the 4 quadruple, we have Keshava, Narayan, and Madhava. Those are the first 3. Then from Shankarshana, Govinda, Vishnu, and Madhusudana. Then from Pradyumna, Trivikrama, Vamana, and Sridhara. And from Aniruddha, we have Rishikesha, Padmanabha, and Damodar. So we know when we apply tilak, we say Om Keshwaya Namaha, Om Narayana Namaha, Om Madhavaya Namaha, Om Govindaya Namaha, Om Vishnavaya Namaha. We are remembering these 12 deities, expansions, incarnations. And they come again from the second quadruple expansion, come ultimately from Lord Balaram. Okay? So, next time we are applying tilak, we'll remember now these 12 personalities and where they are coming from. So in addition to these 12, there are another 8 expansions, 2 from each quadruple, and this combines these 8 plus the 12 is 20, plus the original 4 quadruple is 24. So from there, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu then gives explanations of each of them and their names based on how they are holding the different weapons within their forearms. So all the detail is given based on the different arrangements. Who is who? So again, there's no speculation. Now, one point to clarify. Some of the names we heard might be familiar, like Damodar or Govinda. This is not Krishna in Vrindavan. These are different personalities. Again, these are expansions from the quadruple expansions. So these are not the same. So do not confuse. This is, when we say Damodar, this is not referring to our beloved Damodar Lila, Krishna, being bound by the love of Mother Yashoda. Okay? So now, after Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is explaining these different quadruple expansions, he goes into then describing the different avatars. So, I wanted to read just 2 verses. So in 245 and 246, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu explains there are 6 types of incarnations, avatars of Krishna. So 6. One includes the incarnations of Vishnu, the Purusha avatars. Another includes the incarnations meant for the performance of pastimes, the Lila avatars. There are incarnations that control the material qualities, the Guna avatars. Incarnations who appeared during the reign of each Manu, Manvantara avatar. Incarnations in different millenniums, Yuga avatars. Incarnations of empowered living entities, Shakti Vesha avatars. So there are in total 6 avatars. Okay, 6 categories, I should say. And we should understand, and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, before describing now all the details, he says, there are innumerable incarnations of Krishna, and there is no possibility of counting them. We can simply indicate them by giving an example of the moon and branches of a tree. So we should understand that when we talk about Dasa avatars, that is just a sample. There are uncountable, as many waves as there are in an ocean, like that, there are innumerable expansions and incarnations of Krishna. But they fall within these 6 categories that we'll discuss. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu goes on to explain each of them. So now we'll begin with the Purusha avatars. Now, in understanding the Purusha avatars, we come to the process of creation. And this is very elaborately described in Srimad Bhagavatam. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is establishing it. Again, the purpose of explaining this detail is to help us rid ourselves of our ego of thinking we can figure this out. It's so complicated and so detailed and so technical. We should just surrender to Shastra and understand this is how it was done. Because our own scientific minds are very feeble in trying to understand this. So that is the point of going through some of this detail, like we've already done, and we'll continue. So now, what we'll notice is that there is a very precise process of creation and a very sequential process, step by step. Just like if you make anything, you get, if you buy some furniture and you have to assemble it, it comes with step-by-step instructions. And the step-by-steps are very logical. They build upon each other. So if we see how Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is explaining and summarizing from different points of Shastra, that this creation is also very systematically done. It is not some random Big Bang that created this universe. Very systematic. And we're only going to hit the highlights of it. More detail is given in Canto 2 and 3 of Srimad Bhagavatam and Canto 5. And This is why Srila Prabhupada wanted the Temple of Vedic Planetarium, to very clearly establish the creation of the universe based on Shastra, to inspire the scientific community to realize this is the place of getting real knowledge, because it's so perfectly explained. Okay? So now we come back to Sankarsana. So member of the quadruple expansion, Vasudeva, Sankarsana, Pradyumna, and Aniruddha. So Sankarsana is an expansion from Lord Balaram. Now Lord Balaram is the cause of both the material and the spiritual creation. It is from him that everything is created. So the material world is ultimately created through him, and also the spiritual world. So everything kind of emanates through the expansion of Lord Balaram. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu reminds us very clearly that dull matter, just matter itself, cannot create anything. There must be a superior cause. Just like if you go and you have, some box of materials, like let's say a piece of furniture, and you just empty the box, will you all of a sudden have a piece of furniture? No, some higher cause, the living entity, has to come and assemble those materials. So dull matter is dull. It will just sit there. But it must be instigated into action by the superior living force. So the power to create, it is not based on the chemical composition of the universe. That is like those supplies within a box. Still, somebody has to put it together. And that somebody, that source of creation, the power to create, it is coming from Sankarsana, and ultimately from Lord Balaram, and then ultimately from Krishna. So from Krishna to Balaram to Sankarsana. Okay? So this is the power, and let us never forget that dull matter does not create itself on its own. Never. We have no experience of that in our entire existence. So now, to create the material world, Sankarsana then incarnates himself as Mahavishnu, along with all of the ingredients necessary for material creation. And this is called Pradhan. So from Sankarsana, he expands himself as Mahavishnu. And within that, also all of the ingredients necessary for creation. Okay? You can think of all the things in the box needed to create. So there are 16 principal energies that are used in creation, and these are all explained in more detail. We're not going to go into the detail today. And Mahavishnu, where he is residing. So he's residing in the Viraja river. And this river is the border between the material world and the spiritual world. So the Viraja river is the border. And Mahavishnu is lying in that river, floating in that, you can say, between the spiritual and material world. And Krishna, we'll see this over and over again, and his expansions, they never touch the material world. So Krishna and all his plenary expansions, they never interact with nature. His secondary and other incarnations will. And we'll discuss who does and who does not. Okay? So now Mahavishnu, sitting in the Viraj, lying on Anantashish, he glances over the material energy and the things become agitated. So by his glance, the matter begins to agitate and things start to become created. And then Mahavishnu has to add one more ingredient into the creation: the living entities. The living entities don't come from the material creation, they come from the spiritual world. So Mahavishnu then injects or impregnates the material creation with all of the living entities. So the key point here is, life doesn't come from matter. It comes from Krishna. All part and parcel. And he is the only source of life. It is not a matter of evolution or the evolving of time. No. The material nature, like that box of materials, it can't create anything. So the glance of Mahavishnu begins to manifest all of this, and then he impregnates the material nature with all of the living entities. But because Mahavishnu doesn't directly interact with the material energy, this impregnation of the living entities in the material world is accomplished by Lord Shiva. So Lord Shiva impregnates the material nature with all of the living entities. But we understand he is not the creator of the living entities. They are all parts and parcels of Krishna. So we'll see again who Lord Shiva is in a few minutes. So the universes that are created by Mahavishnu, they are emanating from the pores of his skin. So remember, Krishna, Balaram, Shankarshna, Mahavishnu. There are a couple steps in between, but I'm summarizing. From the pores of Mahavishnu's skin are coming all these gigantic universes. Within each universe, there are millions and millions of planets. So you can imagine how big Mahavishnu is. It's inconceivable, right? And the universes, they remain intact for the duration of one breath. When Mahavishnu exhales, the universes come out, and when he inhales, they come all back in. Now we know Lord Brahma's life is trillions of years long, but it is one breath for Mahavishnu. So to give us a relative understanding of our size, we are very proud of our prowess, but we are very insignificant in the context of creation. And so, and where do the universes sit? They sit when Mahavishnu is exhaling. They're floating in the air of his exhale. Again, all this detail given in our Shastra. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was explaining this in very great detail. So again, Mahavishnu glances over the material energy, agitates it into the creation, and then impregnates the living entities. But there are some steps in between. Now, when the creation is complete, or at least the shell is there, then Lord Vishnu expands himself again. So the first Purusha avatar is this Mahavishnu, or Karna Dakshai Vishnu, meaning lying on the Karna ocean, the causal ocean. The second Purusha avatar is Garbho Dakshai Vishnu. So Vishnu then enters into each universe. So all the universes emanating from his pores, millions and millions, innumerable universes. Lord Vishnu expands himself and enters then into each individual universe. So now within each universe, there is a Lord Vishnu. And that name of the Vishnu is Garbho Dakshai Vishnu. And Garbho Dakshai Vishnu sees that when he comes inside the universe, it's all dark and there's nothing here. So he fills half the universe with water. And that is the perspiration from his body. And then from there, he lies down on Anantashesh. And from there, a lotus flower emerges from his navel. A stem and flower. And then atop that flower, who appears? Lord Brahma. So now you can see where Lord Brahma appears in the creation in relative to the whole context. So after the millions of the creation of Mahavishnu first, and all the material elements, then the establishment of the universe, then the entering the universe of Garbho Dakshai Vishnu, then the creation of the Garbha ocean, then Lord Brahma emerges. And he is considered Aja, unborn, but not Anadi, because he has a source. He is coming from this lotus flower of Garbho Dakshai Vishnu. So we can see that when we say Lord Brahma is the creator, he is the empowered creator, that you can say the assisted, the secondary creator. Right? So now after the Lord Brahma is sitting atop the lotus flower, then all the different planetary systems are created. Lord Brahma is given the power by Lord Krishna after doing his tapasya, and then he begins to create, and then this different unfolds. Now a third Purusha avatar comes. Now we're still all within the first category of the 6 avatars. The third Purusha avatar is Kshirodakshay Vishnu. Kshirodakshay Vishnu is the maintainer and master of the universe. So he is lying on the milk ocean. Thus he is called Shiro. Kshirodakshay Vishnu. He's lying on the milk ocean. And here he is maintaining everything. And also he, through his reflective expansion, takes presence as super soul, Paramatma, in the hearts of all living entities. So when we talk about Paramatma, this is Kshirodakshay Vishnu, one of the 3 Purusha avatars. We sometimes see in some pastimes Lord Brahma, at the request of the demigods, coming to the banks of an ocean and offering prayers to Lord Vishnu, and then Lord Vishnu comes on Ananta Shesh to the edge and receives whatever query is coming. You may have seen that. That is Kshirodakshay Vishnu. So that is who Lord Brahma is approaching. So the Kshirodakshay Vishnu also is present within each and every universe. And actually the universal form is also coming from the Kshirodakshay Vishnu. So again, the point of the matter is that this process is extraordinarily precisely described. And it is done very systematically in this process of creation. So this is the first of the 6 categories. That was the Purusha avatars. Mahavishnu or Karadakshay Vishnu, Garbhodakshay Vishnu, and Kshirodakshay Vishnu. Then Chaitanya Mahaprabhu goes on to explain the Lila avatars, the pastime avatars. And these are the ones we may be more familiar with. Matsya, Kurma, Lord Ram, Lord Nrsimha, all these different pastime avatars. Now again, there are innumerable Lila avatars. We cannot count them. We are just talking about a sampling of them. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu makes that point very clearly in discussing what's not. So the third category of avatars then, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu explains, are the Guna avatars. Now, there are 3 functions of the material world. There is the creation, the maintenance, and dissolution. So it is created, it's maintained for some time, and then it dissolves. All during the duration of one inhale and exhale of Mahavishnu. So now the Lord has 3 incarnations as controllers or administrators or directors of the 3 modes of Sattva Gun, Rajogun, and Tamogun. So these are the Guna avatars. So Lord Vishnu himself expands to be the director of the mode of goodness. Now we must remember, he is always transcendental to the modes of nature. He is untouched. So whenever there is any need to interact with the modes, that is where Lord Brahma and Lord Shiva come in. They are both under the influence of material nature. So then Lord Brahma, and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu explains, based on piety and past devotional service, a Jiva Tattva is infused or empowered with the quality of this mode of passion and then creation by the arrangement of Garbhodakshay Vishnu. So a living entity, a Jiva Tattva, becomes Lord Brahma and thus assists in the creation process. So there's a very beautiful verse here. We sometimes talk about the Trinity and who is supreme and this and that, and now we should have no ambiguity, right? We are knowing where Lord Brahma comes in the scheme of creation. So there is a beautiful verse from Brahma Samhita. This is quoted by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in verse 304. And he's so brilliant, of course, Supreme Lord. But how Chaitanya Mahaprabhu presents these verses, we should understand. He makes a point and then provides different supporting evidences. So when he says that Lord Brahma is an empowered living entity, an empowered creation, one may wonder, well, what is Lord Brahma's opinion? So this is a quote from Brahma Samhita, which is very ironic because Lord Brahma is the compiler. And he says, the sun manifests his brilliance in a gem, although it is a stone. Similarly, the original personality of Godhead, Govinda, manifests his special power in a pious living entity. Thus, the living entity becomes Brahma and manages the affairs of the universe. Let me worship Govinda, the original personality of Godhead. So Lord Brahma is saying, just as a gem may sparkle, but that sparkle is coming from the sunlight. He's saying, I may be seen to be this creator, but I am simply empowered by a much higher cause. Now this is Lord Brahma himself speaking. Lord Brahma himself is speaking. So we understand, where he falls. He is one of the guna avatars. Okay? He's a jiva tattva empowered to perform this great service. Then we come to Lord Shiva. So the third of the three guna avatars. 3 Purusha avatars and 3 guna avatars. So the third is Lord Shiva. And he oversees the mode of ignorance or dissolution. And in verse 308 and 309 and several others, we get some insight into the different verses. So I'll read a couple verses. Rudra, Lord Shiva, has various forms, which are transformations brought about by association with Maya. Although Rudra is not on a level with the Jiva Tattvas, he still cannot be considered a personal expansion of Lord Krishna. Milk is transformed into yogurt when it associates with a yogurt culture. Thus, yogurt is nothing but milk, but it still is not milk. So what the point here is that Lord Shiva actually has a very unique position. It is a single tattva. So like there are innumerable Jiva tattvas, there are innumerable Vishnu tattvas, there is one Shiva tattva, there are expansions of different Rudras, of course, but there is Shambhu tattva. And this is an expansion of Krishna, but it is not Krishna. So he sits in potency between the Jiva tattva and the Vishnu tattva. Some exact math is given in terms of the qualities. Krishna possesses 64 categories of qualities. Lord Vishnu possesses 60. Lord Shiva possesses 55. And the highest Jiva tattva, 50. So 55 is sitting between Lord Vishnu and the Jiva tattva. That is where Shambhu tattva is. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and in Brahma Samhita, we get this comment about this milk in yogurt. So in one way, yogurt is nothing but milk. But we cannot say milk or yogurt is milk. So like that, Shambhu Tattva, Lord Shiva, is an expansion from Krishna, but he is not Krishna. So simultaneously, same and different. Just like the living entity is part and parcel of Krishna, so it is part of Krishna, but minute in quantity. So similarly, Lord Shiva has an empowered position to oversee the destruction and dissolution of the universe. So there's much more we can speak about Lord Shiva, but in the interest of time, we'll continue forward. So that is the 3 avatars we've talked about. The 4th is the Manvanta avatars. So these are within each Manu. So there are 14 Manus within the day of Brahma. And within the reign of each Manu, an incarnation appears in that era. So there are 14 Manus, and each of those incarnations Chaitanya Mahaprabhu describes. And then there are the Yuga avatars. And there are, in each Yuga, Satya, Treta, Dwapar, and Kali Yuga, there is an avatar. In Satya Yuga is the white avatar, in Treta Yuga red, in Dwapar Yuga black, and in Kali Yuga yellow. So these were described. And then we have the Shaktavesh avatar. So the verses that we leave off with today, we end with the Yuga Avatar discussion. And I'll leave you with one, kind of amazing point. Sanatana Goswami, after hearing about Satya Yuga Avatar, Treta Yuga Avatar, Dwapar Yuga Avatar, and then he hears about Kali Yuga Avatar, yellow incarnation, propagating the holy names of the Lord. Well, who is speaking? That same avatar. And so Sanatana Goswami so cutely and cleverly says, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, I'm not understanding who is Kali Avatar. Please tell me. So he wants Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to more directly explain. And then Chaitanya Mahaprabhu replies back, one does not claim himself to be an avatar. Shastra defines who is avatar. Very sweet exchange, very kind of subtle exchange. So we'll discuss that starting next week. So anyways, as I mentioned in the beginning, very technical in nature. The takeaway from this, everything is prescribed very clearly in Shastra. No need to speculate, no need to guess. And ultimately, we are all eternal servants of Krishna. We are part and parcel of Him. He is so dear to us. We are so dear to Him. But we have forgotten the first part, how dear He is to us. And so by following the principles of Krishna consciousness as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is teaching us, we'll again remember our relationship, just as a child and father and mother rekindle their relationship of extraordinary love. Because we are part and parcel of Krishna, that relationship is there. And so, this detail is meant just to give us some good conviction. It's all there. Just surrender to the Lord and chant the holy names of the Lord. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Ananta Koti Vaishnavrinda ki. Any comments or questions today?
Thank you, Babuji. Hare Krishna, Babuji. It is kind of a complicated one, I would say, but you described it very precisely in an organic manner. So I have basically two questions. One was, is this all whatever we discussed just now? Is this into which language, like originally is scripted?
Most of it is coming. It's from Sanskrit in Srimad Bhagavatam. So in Srimad Bhagavatam, this detail is given in much more detail. Which energy comes first, second, third? Which material element comes first, second, third? How from ether comes sound and the different levels of what they call from most subtle to gross. I mean, exquisite detail is given. This was just a high level summary, but all the detail is given in Srimad Bhagavatam.
Okay, thank you. And the second question was, you mentioned that Mahavishnu is getting present in each universe. So in each universe, is Krishna prayed as a supreme personality Godhead on the only Earth planet, or will the same kind of a structure will be there the way we have in we right now we know only one planetary system, like this Earth, Sun, right?
Yeah.
Mercury and all that. That's what we call it, Akash Ganga. That's what we call it. So on the other planetary system, will the same be there, and will
Yes.
those people be aware of Krishna as the supreme personality of Godhead?
So good question. So one just small clarification. Mahavishnu expands himself as Garbhodakshay Vishnu to enter the universe. So Mahavishnu himself doesn't enter. Another expansion of Lord Vishnu comes as Garbhodakshay Vishnu. So that's who's present here. Now, in terms of the universe, so if you think about in the context of everything, right? So if we go to the individual universe, that universe, where did it come from? The pore of Mahavishnu's skin, right? From the body of Mahavishnu, basically. Where Mahavishnu came from? Expansion from Sankarshana. Where Sankarshana came from? Ultimately, Lord Balaram. And where Lord Balaram came from? Krishna's to Bhagavan Swayam, the source of everything. So regardless, now all the way back down to that individual universe, regardless of which tiny planet you're on within the universe, your relation with the absolute truth is the same. Just like if I live in the city of Troy, on the northwest side of Troy or the southeast side of Troy, my relationship with the state, the country, and the world is the same. So no matter where I exist in this universe, higher planetary systems or lower planetary systems, ultimately my relationship is with one, and that is Krishna. So that fact is not a relative fact. So what I mean by it's not relative to where I exist. It's absolute, it's unequivocal. And you can think about, building that universe back up to its origin. Now, who knows about this? That is based on the individual piety of every living entity, who has the fortune of coming in contact with this knowledge. And that is only happened by the mercy of a pure devotee. So when Srila Prabhupada brings this to the unqualified world of all of us, that is our great fortune. But whether we know it or not, it's a fact. Just like a child, whether he knows about the law of gravity or not, it doesn't matter. When he throws the ball in the air, it will fall down. Whether he knows about it or not. Fact is fact. So similarly, fact is fact. We all originally come from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And there is no matter of opinion who is supreme, who is not supreme. No, this is all exactly, sequentially, and systematically given in Shastra. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu will establish that more clearly next set of verses, that we have to take all these incarnations in context of Shastra. Otherwise, it's a matter of what I think versus what you think. And what I think, or what you think, please forgive me, is not relevant. What matters is what Krishna and Scripture says.
Okay? I think to say that, on those planets, like where the Shastra exists, like whether, for example, we don't know on other planets, right, on Saturn, or whether they would be aware of such thing that, this thing exists, right?
Yeah.
So it's first the awareness.
Yeah. So each planetary system, there are 14 planetary systems. And so when we see about our 9 planets or 8 planets, depending on whether you count Pluto or not, that's all. There's still many, many higher planetary systems, and there are lower planetary systems. And again, all of this is going to be depicted very graphically in the TOVP. But so based on where you are, the availability of Shastra is different, right? Based on one's qualification, also one's desire. Because if one doesn't want to know anything about Krishna, then Krishna will fulfill that desire and take one to a place where there is not very much knowledge. And also remember, based on the Yuga. So in Satyuga, on this earthly planet, everybody knew Krishna. Everybody was engaged in devotional service. But then the same planet, as the eras evolve, that knowledge declines. So it's not only geographic, but it's also based on the time cycle. So just 3 yugas ago, everybody knew and was engaged in devotional service, and virtually nobody was. Today, it's the exact opposite, and we wonder, why are nobody's doing this? Well, in the very next yuga coming, because Satyuga is coming next, everybody again will be engaged in very pious work and devotional service.
I wish this Kaliyuga will become Satyuga soon.
Actually, it is because of the mercy of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And we'll see that in the next verses. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is going to quote some verses that from Srimad Bhagavatam, that even though there are so many faults in Kali Yuga, because of the presence of the Maha Mantra, it has become most auspicious and most sublime. So actually, this is the most auspicious time because Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's mercy is still very alive. So we can create Satyuga-like qualities, just as Lord Ramchandra, by his great rule in Treta Yuga, was able to create Satyuga-like qualities, right? That's described in 9th canto. So it is possible. And by the mercy of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, that can also happen here. And we are during the golden era, the 10,000 years after Chaitanya Mahaprabhu appeared, where actually devotional consciousness is increasing. And then actually the real Kali Yuga begins. We're only seeing a partial aspect of Kali Yuga. As bad and scary as it looks, this is not even the real Kali Yuga, because we are still in this golden era. So before we even get anywhere near that, finish our business.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's what I was saying. Thank you, Prabhuji. Thank you so much.
Prabhuji, I have a question too.
Yes.
Like, what's the God form in Satyuga for us?
Well, Kapil Dev, the son of Kardama Muni and Devahuti.
Thank you.
Hare
Hare Krishna, and we appreciate your time and effort and such a nice explanation for such a complex Shastra. I don't know if we would have been able to even think to read it actually, and now we are, by your mercy, we are able to grasp something out of it.
Hare
Thank you.
Krishna. Thank you for your blessings.
Appreciate.
Dhanyavad.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Can I ask a question?
Yes, Master, yes.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Dhamma my sister, so beautiful. It was so.
I'm losing.
So hard to understand this, and thank you so much for making it so simplified.
Hare Krishna, Mataji, your phone is cutting out, or the internet's
the
not?
two questions I had. One is, Daksha. Can you hear me? Can you hear me now?
Okay, yeah, try that now.
Okay. Yeah, I was saying, sorry, that Gadu Dakshai Vishnu and Shiru Dakshai Vishnu. Now, you say that Brahma, when he says his prayers, he goes to the Shiru Dakshai Vishnu. But isn't it that Garbu Dakshai Vishnu is the one who has created he is the one who is there in each of the universes, right? So, and then Shiru Dakshai is the one who expands and comes and as a Paramatma in the soul. So, why is it to the Shiru Dakshai Vishnu? And how come that the milk ocean, I'm not able to relate that, because if Shiru Dakshai Vishnu is there in the Milky Ocean, then what about then is the Paramatma within the soul is another expansion from that Shiru Dakshai Vishnu?
So, Shirodakshai Vishnu is present within the material creation, lying in Shweta Dweep. Right? So, the Shweta Dweep is the one kind of eternal realm within the material creation. And there, that is where Shirodakshai Vishnu is present. And he is maintaining and coordinating all of the material affairs. So, Garbhodakshai Vishnu is lying on Ananta Shesh, and from his navel the lotus stem has come. But sitting atop that lotus stem is Lord Brahma, and within the creation there is the planet of Shweta Dweep, and that's where this milk ocean lies, and that's where Shirodakshai Vishnu resides. In Shirodakshai Vishnu, so Paramatma we say is a reflective expansion. So just like the moon, if you have 10 pots of water, you'll see the moon in each of the 10 pots. Well, there's only one moon. So similarly, through the reflective expansion, the Shirodakshai Vishnu is present in everyone's heart as Paramatma. So it is the one and the same, but it is a reflective expansion. So that's how that manifests itself.
And thank you, Prabhuji. But one thing, after you have mentioned all this, yeah, one begins to appreciate that everything is by Shastra. But a small thing which is coming in my mind, if I may forgive me for explain that. But I'm feeling now that the way we talk about Krishna, we have such a direct relationship, and we have forgotten that relationship. But when you explain so much in detail, and we are such a speck out there in the miles of desert, right, of sand particles. So where the Krishna is right in Golak Vrindavan, though he is as a reflective expansion in all our hearts, but now I feel that it's just it's very hard to comprehend, and that's the reason why that attraction to Krishna is not coming, because it's just that he's so far fetched. I feel now after you have explained this. This is what my thought is. So please forgive me. But
just like the son of a king. The son of a king sees that his father is surrounded by so many ministers and so many advisors and so many military personnel and servants and grand opulences and so many hundreds of people waiting in line to see him and make big appointments and all those things. And if you want to get a 5-minute association with the king, it's unthinkable. But if son says, he doesn't call king, Papa, give me one cookie. King will immediately drop what he's doing and give that cookie to his son. That is our relationship with Krishna. He is our father. We are not far away from him. We are intimately connected with him as father. Yes, a very powerful father. But at the end of the day, this father doesn't enjoy demonstrating his opulence and his prowess. Actually, what he enjoys in playing with his children, all his devotees. That's what he enjoys. So we can understand this to appreciate the extraordinary power of our Father. But remember, what really gives him happiness, and that is why Krishna himself is not involved in any of this. Why? Because his only activity is to enjoy with his devotees, all of you. That's his only activity. He doesn't get involved in the creation and overseeing the Rajagun, Tamagun, so he doesn't get involved in any of that. Because he only wants to enjoy with his devotees. So we are not far away from him, or at least I can say this, he is not far away from us. But we must not try to think we are far from him. Actually, because he loves us more than anyone. And that is the point Chaitanya Mahaprabhu made in the beginning of this section, that verse we read, which said, just as one is so dearly associated with their body, Krishna is associated with us because we are his part and parcel. So, and yes, we may be limited in our ability to show affection to so many people. So one might think, well, Krishna has trillions and trillions, innumerable living entities. How he'll ever remember me? That is because we are limited. But Krishna can equally reciprocate with every living entity as if they're the best friend. And he shows this over and over again in Govardhan Lila. Millions and millions and millions of residents are gathered under Govardhan, yet every resident is as if Krishna is looking straight at me right in front. But every resident has that same experience. So what is Krishna showing to us? Yes, he may be grand and he may have all these things, but at the end of the day, he simply wants to enjoy rasagulas with his devotees and enjoy sweet, sweet pastimes in a very intimate mood. That's his desire. Now, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu will explain the different mellows of bhakti, and then we decide what relationship we are with. So don't be dissuaded by this grandness. Yes, we have a great Father, but remember, he is never too busy for us. We, unfortunately, are sometimes too busy for him.
very beautifully put, Prabhu. So much. Thank you so much for making it so simple and inspiring. Thank you, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Vandavats. Yes, online you have some questions? Who's asking?
More longer. Hare Krishna Prabhu, when we are in deep love with Supreme Personality of Godhead, we could be aloof from the conditioned souls in our present life. Does it mean we have a selfish interest to transcend from this conditioned life rather than engaging ourselves with other conditioned souls to elevate them also to transcendental position? Which one is the best from the above in doing devotional service to Lord, Prabhu?
Ya Bilashita Shunyam Gyana Kamarena Vitamanukulena Krishna Anushilanam Bhakti Uttama. The highest of all devotion is fully selfless. So the mood of bhakti that is most pleasing to Krishna is when one doesn't even care for their own salvation, but simply is trying to save others. Para dukha dukhi. Their only pain and difficulty is not their own trials and tribulations, but the pain they feel is seeing the others suffering in separation from Krishna. And so the devotee is inspired not to save themselves, but to save all the living entities around them. And that's what Srila Prabhupada did. At the age of 69, turning 70 on the boat, he left Vrindavan and established the process of bhakti. Why? For us. So, yes, while we try to save ourselves, the ultimate process of saving ourselves is to engage in the process of distributing this transcendental science far and wide to save others. And in doing so, we shall also be rescued. But that is not the motive. The motive is seeing the suffering of others causes pain and suffering to the devotee. The devotee is not worried about their own freedom from birth, death, old age, and disease. They're simply focused on how I can help others from the pains of separation from Krishna. That is the best of all moods. We should not, in our own devotion, become negligent of others around us. Okay? Yep.
What is the ultimate devotional service to Supreme Personality of Godhead?
Hare
which-
Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Chanting the holy names is the ultimate means of rendering devotional service to Krishna. It is most pleasing to him. It is also most beneficial for us. That is unequivocally the best mode of devotional service. And we'll see that next week's sets of verses. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is going to elaborate and expand upon that. And thus, what did Chaitanya Mahaprabhu preach? One thing: chant the holy names of the Lord. Okay? Any other questions?
There's another part.
Prabhuji, I have a follow-up question.
Yes.
So as you said that a Vaishnava or a pure devotee should be bothered and they're trying to take care of others. So, but would not that association, like, because we are not at that stage of being a sadhu, that we are not getting affected by the association, or so how we can like
Yes.
be helpful to others while maintaining
Yeah.
I would say we should not be like
I understand.
affected badly as to us,
Yeah.
like I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
Yeah, no, it's a great question, because so we have to work according to our time, place, and circumstance, and according to our situation. So, we perform our sadhana and increase our own knowledge and our own purity to give us the potency to be able to go out and help others, right? So that is not a selfish endeavor of purifying myself, of pursuing my sadhana and practicing devotional service, when the goal is to protect oneself. So one must be conscious of their position and help, but it's not all just directly one thing. One can support this by going out and distributing books. One is not risking themselves. I don't know anything. Read a purport from Srila Prabhupada and explain that purport to whoever you read in your own terms. Done. We don't have to be an erudite scholar. That's not required. It's simply just reading these purports and regurgitating them in maybe a different form. But just that's what we do. So we do protect ourselves from association, and so we charge the battery up through good association, through good sadhana, and then we do according to our ability, and that's why we always work under guidance. When we work in Krishna consciousness, it works in the material world too, that we work under guidance. When you go to the office, you don't just do what you want. You work under, guidance. So similarly, when we work under guidance in spiritual life, we're always protected. We're protected from maybe inadvertently going off the path or maybe making some mistakes in our immature understanding. And it just requires a humble position. The humility to say, I don't know. And it's easy to say, I don't know in the beginning. It's harder to say, I don't know later as you mature. But actually, the more we learn, about this, it should inspire, man, I don't know anything. Right? It should make us more humble. Boy, I don't know anything. Let me just chant and eat rasgullas with Krishna. Let's keep it simple.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna. Very nicely explained. Dhanavad.
Okay, anything else? Okay, so if not, we'll hopefully meet again next week and just continue discussing this beautiful chapter 20. Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava.